Alteryx as a data integration or data analytics tool, what it can offer, and what we plan to cover as part of the training later. So before we get started, I just wanted to briefly know about your technical background, what you've been working on, and what's your expectation from this particular training. So if you can just go through one of you, that helps. Yeah, Vinodya, you can start.
Yes, Raj. See, I have overall 5 years of experience in reporting only. Basically, I'm using this Excel and VB and MS Access with VB along with SQL. And
Okay.
in my previous project was in Franklin Templeton. Client is demanding to do some workflows on the this Alteryx only. But while going to try to take a training in the Alteryx set, I'm able to download only free trial. I'm not even publish these apps in the gallery, everything. But my client demand is to do work in the Alteryx only. That is what I'm looking for. Take this training completely so that I can able to independently handle these Alteryx projects.
Okay, so you are coming more from an Excel-based work into a tool-based activity that they wanted you to upgrade yourself. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. Whom do we have next? I see the names are entered as admin, but guys, anyone else is on the meeting? Sorry, I just see the names entered as admin. If you can just unmute yourself and introduce, that helps.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah, my name is Kumar. Actually, I'm actually working in 3 years of experience, but actually I'm the DAVDU main reporting tool. But the project is started off recently, but they need further expectation for the Alteryx to backend, and then we have to report generated. That is actually my requirement. That's the reason.
Okay. Okay. So your data processing, they wanted to do it in Alteryx and then publish your data sources in Tableau.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. All right. Thanks, Kumar. And whom do we have? We have one more participant. Again, that I see as admin. If you can just unmute yourself and introduce yourself, that helps. Okay, maybe some audio problem, I guess. Right, so let's get started then. So yeah, Alteryx as a data processing tool per se is built to address for different sets of target audience to start with. What do I mean by that is,
1 minute, Raj. Sorry.
yeah.
Anybody is recording this call?
Yeah, it is being recorded. You can
okay.
reach out to organizers next.
No.
So Alteryx as a data processing tool is designed to address or to be useful by different sets of target audience. One, your ETL engineers. Second one, your data analytics folks or BI folks. Third one, your data science teams. Now, this also can be for those folks who work on mostly on finance, where we get to work with statistical information of the data, Excels, right, files, and so on. Now, how does it distinguish, or how do we get to use this tool, or how these different sets of targets audience get utilized by the tool is. Now, as a traditional ETL activity or traditional ETL engineer, what do I need is I need a tool that can read from my source data system and then apply some data transformation rules like filters, joins, aggregations, right? Sorting the data, cleansing the data, and all that. So I need a tool that can do all this activity and then can write into my target system. So yes, Alteryx does that. Alteryx has those capabilities. Alteryx has the capabilities to read from certain data system, like it can be a SQL based data system, it can be a file based data system, and so on. Read the data, process it, and then write it. That's one thing. Second thing is where you need data preparation to be done, right? As part of your data prep, you may want to blend your data, that is joining the data, right? Integrating them and so on. And then you may also want to transform your data and so on. So as Kumar was mentioning, or in most of the BI solutions, what you need is you have a interactive dashboarding tool like Tableau, right? Or ClickView or ClickSense, whatever it is, right? Or Power BI, whatever it is. You wanted to process that particular data, you wanted to prep the data, right? And then ultimately you feed that as a data source, and then you do some more data processing on your BI level also while you display the data and so on. Now, Alteryx can be used as its upstream system, upstream to your BI tool, right? Before you send to your Tableau or Click or whatever the uh, uh, visualization tool that you have, you need a certain kind of data prep tool or an ETL tool, and that's where Alteryx can come in, right? Alteryx has the capabilities to prep the data, to apply all those required pre-processing work and all that. And finally, you also have the capabilities within the Alteryx tool that can address the needs of typical data science solutions. Something like analytics, which can be predictive analytics, right? Or time-based analytics, right? Or what do you say? Spatial analytics, and so on and so forth. So there are pre-built algorithms available for your AI and ML needs that can generate your models and so on. So depending upon what you intend to use the tool for, you can use it accordingly. Now, since we have here folks mostly falling into the second category where you wanted to prep your data, you wanted to blend your data, you wanted to transform your data, maybe you wanted to cleanse the data, you wanted to standardize your data before you further ingest it for your data visualization, right? So what do you do, or what all activities that you need? First thing, you need a tool that can offer the pre-built tools or features or rules that can make your job easier so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel, you don't have to write all your code. Second thing, the integration between your downstream visualization tools and your data processing tool, that is Alteryx here. So it's not like you process the data, you generate the processed data, you put it somewhere, and then you pick it up from there to use it as part of your downstream visualization tool. If you can make that activity, if you can streamline that, that is, once you get your processed data, if you can directly ingest that processed data into the repositories of your downstream visualization tool, that can even make the job more easier or more automated way, right? So Alteryx has those capabilities. Alteryx can directly write your processed output into the repositories of your Tableau or Power BI, etc. Right? So that's what Alteryx has available. Now, talking about uh, what are the things that we're going to learn as part of this tool is, we'll start with how to preparing your data, which is ideally considered as restructuring your data if there are requiring any filtering of unwanted information, right? deduplication of the data, and normalizing this data by pivoting, unpivoting, and all those activities, right? And then comes talking about integration of that particular data. Let's say your primary data source is Excel. You're getting the data from your Excel. You read from it. Maybe you wanted to look up on some other Excel where you may want to apply some VLOOKUP kind of activities, or you may want to do some absolute match between two Excel inputs, or some partial match, right? Before you identify the data that needs to be processed. So those features are also available within Alteryx, which will be covering as part of the training concept. And then we'll also look into certain concepts like regular expressions for more advanced solution building, right? To make it more dynamic solutions. If, for example, let's say you are getting some data input field where it is having a descriptive data, you need to identify within that particular descriptive column value, you need to pinpoint where you have maybe a credit card number. So you need to write certain expression to identify a value which is in the format of a credit card number, or a SSN value, or some phone number, and so on. So how do you make it more advanced? So you have something called regular expressions which you can write into it to make it more reusable, right? And we also have features called macros. Again, here macros are different than what we have in Excel macros. Here macros more or less they offer reusability and more integration capabilities, right? And then we also have something called analytical applications that using which you can, once you build a solution, right, once you can deploy it as an analytical application, when you wanted to rerun it, you don't need to go into the tool and then run the job and so on. You can just basically have a UI based end product, UI based end flow. It's just like any other icon on your desktop. You can just double click on that particular icon. Your interface will pop up. All that you need, just like on a website, typical website, you just punch in a couple of details and then click on run. In the backend, whatever the flow that you have built, that will be run, right? You don't have to open the tool, go through that, execute flows and all that. So now talking about what are the things out of the box features that we have here is, and how it can help, or why companies are insisting on upskilling to Alteryx than just continuing your work, what you're currently doing with Excel or some other tool is, first thing, reusability, right? Second thing is the ease of processing. And first thing, talking about reusability means, you see, in typical Excel, what do? You get the data files, let's say every month from your client to be processed. Let's say there is a balance sheet report, which you'll be getting maybe every month or every quarter. Let's imagine you have 10 different clients, you'll get 10 different balance sheets every month. Now, balance sheets more or less will be in the same format, right? Just that the numbers will be different. You just have to reprocess them. Though you apply the same number of steps, you still have to apply the same number of, let's say you need to apply some 15 steps to be applied within that particular Excel file. You still need to manually apply, right? You need to pivot it, unpivot it, and then you need to summarize it, you need to sum it, you need to VLOOKUP, whatever that is that you need to do, you need to be doing that, redoing the same steps on different data sheets that are of same structure, right? So how do you minimize this? How do you get rid of these redundant activities? What you have been doing is, now in Alteryx, once you can build a solution, you can apply that solution without rewriting it from the scratch. You can apply the ready to use solution again and again on any number of your data sheets without any redundant work. Now, for the one-time build of the solution, you may take about a couple of hours to build, right? Depending upon the complexity of your logic. Once the code is built, once the an Alteryx workflow is built, you can always just rerun it in 5 minutes or fine, right? Just point to that new data file, simply rerun your workflow. It may take whatever the time that is required, like 5 to 10 minutes of processing time, and then you have your report ready, right? And second thing is, whatever the solution that you built here, it's not like only you can use it. You build it and you can share it with your rest of the team. Let's say you have a 5-member team. Now 5 members can use the same solution to work with your respective data sheets. So that's one major bump up that you'll be achieving using a tool-based solutions here than what you typically do in your Excel-based work currently.
Yes, Raj.
Yeah.
In Excel, what will happen? We can do this, routine work by using this VBA macros. Once we write this
Correct.
VBA macro, we can able to automate the complete process. Okay.
Right.
And this VBA program, again, we have to do some subroutines and functions, everything in the Excel. And
Exactly.
while coming to this Alteryx macros, what is different between Alteryx macros to Excel macros?
Yeah, right. So as I was briefly mentioning, Alteryx macros and Excel macros are totally different things. Yes, the name happens to be same, but functionality is totally different. In Alteryx macros, to understand Alteryx macro, in Alteryx, first of all, we have something called a workflow. Now, a workflow is basically a data flow where you define what needs to be done on your source data set before it needs to be processed, and once processed, where it needs to be written. So first of all, how Alteryx works is compared to your Excel. In Excel, what do? You open an Excel file. On the Excel file, that means you have the data in front of you. You apply rules on different columns. As in, when you apply a rule on a particular column, you immediately see that particular column, the entire column being transformed. For example, let's say you have some column D. What you can do, you can write a rule something like D multiplied by 10. And then the moment you enter, the entire row, entire column, values will be changed, and you can immediately see the data being changed to what are the transformed value. Now, in Alteryx, that's not how it works. First, in Alteryx, what you do is you build something called workflow. This is nothing but writing code. You don't write code. Everything is done using a GUI-based tools available. All that you need to do is dragging and dropping and doing a minimal configuration changes. But typically, what you do is first you build that GUI-based flow, defining what is the expected input data file, what are the input file expected to have the columns, and what column needs to be applied with what rule, and so on. You define everything in a workflow, and finally you run the workflow. When you run the workflow, that's when your data file is read, processed, and then output file is written somewhere. Now, once this is happening, you don't see how the data is actually processing, right? Everything happens in the backend itself. So that's one major difference that you'll find. In Excel, you can immediately see how the data is being transformed, and then in there itself, you're directly working on the data. But coming to Alteryx, you first define what needs to be done, and then you apply that particular logic on top of your data file, and then you sit back. It just takes a couple of minutes to process, and then writes into a new location, new file, and then you can look at that newly written output file for your processed output. Now, when you build these workflows, you may be building workflows for different business solutions. As part of your workflow logic, there can be certain logic that can be reused across a bunch of different workflows that you're building, right? You have, let's say, problem statement 1, you have problem statement 2, you have problem statement 3. Let's imagine you're building 3 different workflows. You have workflow 1, workflow 2, and then you have workflow 3. Now, as part of all these workflows, there is certain part of the logic which needs to be re-implemented. Not the entire one, certain part of the logic. Now, instead of rewriting the same set of rules in all these workflows, what I can do is that reusable logic, I can first build that as a separate object called a macro, and then I can use this macro within the logic of this workflow. For example, let's say my workflow design is something going to be, I will be reading from source, and then I'll apply some tool 1, tool 2, and then tool 3, tool 4, and then finally write my output target. This is the workflow design of first problem statement. Second problem statement, I'm going to use some other tool, and then finally write it. But I wanted to use the same logic, whatever I have used using tool 1 and tool 2, somewhere later in the workflow design. But this part of the logic is pretty much the same what I had to use here. Same way again for the another workflow that I'm designing, whatever the bunch of rules that I'm applying, let's say again I'm using some different tools here like filtering or VLOOKUP or whatever it is. Again, I require to use the same logic here. So instead of rewriting or redefining the same rules as part of all these different solutions, what I can do is I can create a macro, and then within that macro, I can define that set of rules and then simply reuse that here instead of rewriting the same logic. That's what a macro in Alteryx is, wherein you can put together a bunch of tools together into a single reusable object so that you can reuse them as part of multiple workflows without rewriting or redefining from the scratch. That's what a macro in Alteryx is.
Yes, I'm clear.
Yeah, okay. So that's what we'll also be learning as part of the training. How do we define these and what are the different things that are available and all that. Coming to the interface and so on, how it looks like, I'll just show you briefly. So this is a Windows based software. So once you install it, this is how the tool is going to look like, right? You'll have all the different tools available. You can see there are different tabs in the toolbar: in, out, preparation, join, parse, and so on. So as I was mentioning, the tool is built for a different target audience. So when we learn, we don't actually cover all the tabs because they are intended for different target audience. So we'll be covering only those tabs that are applicable for us. I think for about first 4 to 5 tabs we'll be covering as part of the training. And in here we'll be building GUI based workflows and all that. Let me see if I have an example I can show you. Yeah. Okay. So if you can see here, this is how typically the designs looks like, right? You'll be using tools. You'll be connecting from where to where the data has to be taken from and sent to. And at each tool, we'll be writing the required transformation rules. See here, for example, I was doing simple concatenation of a couple of columns, right? And you will be able to read from your different input files and then write into elsewhere and all that. So you can use a bunch of different tools that are available. And this is what I was talking about. You have tool 1, tool 2, tool 3, tool 4. Likewise, you can use a bunch of tools depending upon totally the complexity of your business solution. You'll be using those many number of different tools and so on, right? Certain workflows may require 1 or 2 tools, certain workflows may require a bunch of tools, that totally depending upon your logic and so on. So It's very easy to use. Again, yeah, the transition period, it may feel like a bit difficult. Like now, for example, you are pretty well versed in Excel. Let's say whatever the solution now you're building in Excel, if it takes like 15 minutes in Excel, at the beginning in Alteryx, you may spend about maybe about 1.5 hours. So you may feel like, okay, why do I have to spend 90 minutes if I can just complete within 15 minutes in Excel? But that's totally about your ease of or expertise, right? Down the line, once you get enough experience on Alteryx, you'll be able to pretty much build the same thing around the same time. And now, whatever the time that you spent on Alteryx is kind of one-time activity, right? Once you build it, you just save it and then share it with your team. Your team also can reuse the same solution and so on. So that's what you will be achieving as part of your Alteryx. During the training, we'll be learning as much all the tools that are applicable for in BI domain. We'll be also covering how do we do the integration between one of the visualization tool. Maybe we can cover Tableau. Once you generate your processed output from Alteryx, how can you directly deploy that processed output into your Tableau repository as so you can use it as your data source in Tableau workbooks, right? So that's briefly about what we have as part of the agenda.